Tonight and every weekend night here on ENCA, a variety of newsmakers will get their chance to host this program. We'll give you, the viewer, a chance to get involved in the conversation, unfiltered, accountable and accessible. We know that the economy is in a crisis. Public finance is in a mess, and SARS can't perform its primary function, which is to collect taxes. But what is business doing about it? Business in South Africa continues to give the same answers: cuts in government expenditure and trimming of the public service, cutting red tape, reducing government company taxes, and privatization of state-owned enterprises. These would effectively be austerity measures that could drive inequality and increase political and social polarization. Surely we need to start shifting the debate on how we can make the economy more inclusive and more growth-oriented. You can be a part of the conversation. Here's how.
At ENCA using the hashtag LHIO. Call us on 011-759-6340 or send us a WhatsApp or WhatsApp video on 082-884-6370. And make sure those videos are no longer than 30 seconds, please.
I'm joined now in the studio by Business Unity South Africa President Sipho Pityana. Good evening, Sipho. It's lovely having you here.
Adam, good evening and welcome back from your sabbatical. You look nice and refreshed.
I do feel refreshed. Thank you very, very much. You've heard the insert. I mean, yes. We are in a mess. Clearly, this country is in a mess. The economy is in a crisis. Our public institutions are not working. But every time I read Business Day, every time I simply hear business saying the same thing: privatization, deregulation, all of the things that got us in the mess in the first place. Are we looking at a business that is new? Do you have a new agenda?
Well, some of the things are the same, in that the fact of the matter is that we have to look at structural reforms in order to enable a forward movement. And a lot of the problems that we find ourselves in as a result of very serious structural impediments that have been allowed to accrue over a period of time. Some of them were fixed, but over the last 10 years, we went back. I wouldn't say privatization, because I think that that's a cop-out. Our state assets, if we were to privatize SAA today, it would be a giveaway. It would be a fire sale, if you like. There'll be any number of people who will buy it for $1 because it's in such crisis. We'd be giving away fantastic and strategic assets if we tried to privatize Eskom. We have to fix these enterprises, and it entails major restructuring of those, even if we were to split them into three, as some people suggest, and I think that it makes sense. We could do that and still have them in state hands. There's a lot of room to play in the energy generation space and energy transmission space for private sector and so on and so on.
But much of what government is suggesting is austerity measures, cuts in government expenditure. If you cut government expenditure, you're going to have to put more people on the dole. You're going to have to fire more people. That's going to create clearly political and social polarization. It's going to drive inequality. Clearly, that's not going to work. Is there something else?
You know more than I do that Greece was in the same situation. Many number of other countries were in a similar situation. When you have excessive expenditure in the state system, you either have to cut it yourself, or the entities that give you loans and financing arrangement impose conditions and conditionalities on you that will give you money on condition you do A, B, C, D, E. At that point, you've lost control. So you're right. If you go that route, you have to take into account the fact that there are negative social consequences that come with it: job displacement, large numbers of people who will be thrown out on the streets and all of that. How do you deal with that? That's where social partnership comes in. What do we do with the fact that inevitably, if we continue on the trajectory of the way the economy is going, we are inevitably going to be faced with that situation, whether we do it ourselves or it's imposed on us by others. So how do we mitigate the negative impact and social consequences on
I like the idea of the social partnership. You've said this before, and I think it's absolutely important. Others in business have said it as well.
Yeah.
But if you're going to make social partnerships, you have to put something on the table.
Exactly.
Government, we know, has to put something on the table. We know labor has to put something on the table. What is business prepared to put on the table that is different? For instance, are you prepared to consider minimum wage?
Business, in my view today, has adopted a very clear statement of affirmation of being part of socio-economic justice. We accept that the principle of decent work, we accept the principle of minimum wage, we accept the principle that CEO executive pay is something that needs to be looked into. And in fact, we've been in engagement with our social partners as to how we do that.
So I'm going to ask you
whole range of these.
I'm going to ask you more boldly. Are you prepared to consider cuts in executive remuneration in exchange for other concessions from other Labour parties?
Well, everybody you talk to in the conversations that we have in business accepts that the high and exorbitant salaries of some executives it doesn't make good reading in face of high levels of poverty and unemployment and marginalization in our society. Of course, you would have lots of arguments in the room that we are internationally benchmarked and this is what is going on. You can't do it in isolation. It sends the right message, but it doesn't impact structurally on that. That's why there's been a conversation over a period of time of how we do it.
But other countries have done it. There have been other countries that have enforced executive remuneration measures.
Well, we must look at whether those systems have worked or not, and those measures have indeed worked. I'm not sure that it would work here, but it's something that is part of the discussion. There's proposals that there should be a regulated system. There's a proposal that we need a voluntary approach. We should have IOD, for instance, come to the party and say remuneration committees of boards must look at this differently and create an environment for enforcement and self-regulation.
So hold that thought. Stay with us as we continue the conversation after the break. Make sure to use the hashtag LHIO on social media. Will you just tell me when we start again? I hope that's okay.
No, that's fine. What happened?
So welcome back to Let's Have It Out. My guest tonight is Business Unity South Africa President Sipho Pityana. Sipho, I want to come back to you. I mean, you've committed in principle at least to minimum wage. You've committed in principle to a serious consideration of cuts in executive salaries.
Yeah.
The question I want to ask is Sipho Pityana speaking for Sipho Pityana or is he speaking for Business South Africa? I haven't heard many businessmen say what you've been saying.
No. Leadership is about that, isn't it? It is about setting the tone. It is about raising the difficult issues. It is about forcing conversation on these issues. The conversation around executive pay is a conversation that has been going on for 3, 4, 5 years now amongst business leadership of different types. If I said to you that there was a consensus, I would be misleading. There is no mandate on how we deal with this. It's a conversation now that is beyond control of business leaders. It is right in conversation at NEDLAC as part of the negotiation around the job summit. But it's a discussion that we must have. Everybody accepts that it has to be dealt with.
One quick question I want to ask is land. Do you think, I mean, clearly 87% of land in white hands is just unacceptable.
Yes.
It cannot create the kind of social peace we want.
Yeah.
Is business prepared to consider some level of redistribution so that we get a more equitable distribution of land in our society?
Well, business position on land is very clear that it is one of the manifestations of concentration in the economy that creates inefficiencies, that makes it difficult to have inclusive participation of previously marginalized, and that there's a great deal of scope and capacity to do that. In fact, sector-specific organizations like Agri-SA are at the forefront in wanting to propose what we need to do to fast-track redistribution of land and ensure that those who get it turn it into productive units. We consider land as a very important part of asset class that enables people to do a whole range of things that enable their entry and participation in the economy. The issue that is raised by business with regard to this is that if you're going to say we are going to amend the Constitution in order to effect a land expropriation without compensation, what are you fixing? Yeah. It's not an objection to the distribution of land. It's not an objection. In fact, business affirms the right of South Africans to land restitution as part of redress of the injustice of the past.
I think that clears it. We've got a caller on the line. We've got Eve from Boston on the line. Hi, Eve. What is your question or comment?
My question is, where are the unions in this country who were in the forefront of bringing down the economy and shutting down our industries? By now, the unions should have tons of money in their coffers. Also, where are the unions and where were the unions in the last 25 years when Marcus Jooste raped our country? Our members were paying dues. Their dues. Eve, I'd like to know where the unions are. When are they going to start helping us?
I've got your point. I understand it. I think Sipho got it. Sipho, it's a hard question. What do you say? How would you respond to Eve?
Well, I think that the notion that unions are a negative force in the economy is somewhat medieval. We see unions as very important partners. They've played an important role in setting an agenda for the development of this economy. We differ with them on certain issues, but they're a critical partner, and we've navigated difficult situations with them. We don't see them as a negative force that should be held to account for the difficulties that the economy is going through. So I don't know the point about Marcus Jooste, what that's about, but from the business point of view, the manifestation of what we've seen in the likes of the Marcus Jooste phenomenon and the corruption that has been so pervasive with other entities in the business.
You'll condemn that?
We've condemned that, and some of our affiliated business organizations have kicked those out of our organization because we've adopted an integrity pledge that enjoins all of business to conduct their businesses ethically and not to steal.
Okay, that's a good point. Let me just go to the social media. One of our viewers, Naren Singh on WhatsApp, says, what do you think of the idea that it becomes compulsory for big business to invest a percentage of their profits to mentor and partner with the small business? There are places in many parts of the world where it's mandatory for big business to make an investment. If you're in Texas, for instance, the oil revenue in a portion goes into universities. What Naren is saying is, how about making it mandatory for big business to invest in small business? What do you think about that idea?
Well, we have a number of mandatory levies. One of those is the skills levy, and I have to say that it has been abused phenomenally. It's a fund which is supposed to target and address one of the biggest structural problems in our economy, shortage of skills. And that money is used for purposes other than that, and a lot of it is lost through corruption. The second one is through the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment initiatives. Businesses are expected to do two things. One is to set aside enterprise development funds to assist emerging entrepreneurs, and the other is to enable them to have access to selling their goods and services to big and established companies. We are at the forefront of driving that. We think that it provides a fantastic opportunity for growth of small and medium enterprises. You know, Adam, that most developed economies, the small and medium enterprises constitute about over 80%.
That's right.
of your enterprises. In South Africa, it's 65%.
And we
have to drive that. We have to grow that. It creates an opportunity for inclusion of the marginalized.
Hold that thought. Let's go to an ad.